Hello, luxury agents. Today we're going to talk about a concept I call pricing benchmarks. First question is, what is a benchmark? Well, first of all, a benchmark is sort of a baseline for comparison. Understand that properties in the high end are difficult to find comparables for, as we've discussed before. They're unique, they're different, they're one of a kind. At the same time, we need to sort of establish a baseline comparison where we can compare this property to the market, because the properties are so unique and different that it's hard to find comparables. So we need to find other ways to compare them to other sales that have occurred in the marketplace. We can do that by looking at, say, front feet on the water or lake or river. We can talk about square footage of residence or percentages of assessment. That's one of my favorites. You know, if a house sold for $1.1 million and it was assessed for $1 million, that means it sold for 110% of assessment. I love assessment ratios. We can also talk about percentages of list price, which is not always that great, I guess, because it's not really a market-driven thing. And lastly, we can look at the cost to replace or reproduce the subject property. And there's a big difference between replacing a property and reproducing a property. For instance, if you have a brand new Bentley and you crack it up and it has to go to the body shop, and the dealership replaces it with another car, they might give you a car with, 4 doors and 4 tires and leather seats, but it may not be a Bentley. It's a replacement cost. It replaces the utility of the car. It replaces the size, the quality, some of the amenities, and the usability. It gets you from point B to point A, but it's not a reproduction. Reproducing is an exact replica. So in that case, if you brought the Bentley in for work, they would give you another Bentley to drive. Every detail is the same, every finish, every crazy item, whether it's the platinum faucets or the decking that was recovered from the Titanic, everything is exactly the same. And that obviously is a much higher number. So reproduction cost is always more expensive than replacement cost, because the question with reproduction is, would you? If you were starting over from scratch, would you use the same design? Would you use the same exotic materials? Or would you do things a little bit differently? So when you're using replacement cost, reproduction cost as your benchmark, you need to be very careful. I think that typically when you're pricing real estate, when you're trying to come up with a price range to advise a seller on the offering price of their house, is that the reproduction cost typically will set the high end of value, unless there's something with the land that's so scarce, like it's acres and acres on a rare promontory, in a location that could never be duplicated. Well, then in that case, maybe the reproduction cost is sort of the baseline from which you start to figure out what's the emotional component that's going to drive a higher price for that property. But 9 times out of 10, it's very rare for a high-end property to sell for more than replacement or reproduction cost. And reproduction cost will always set the upper limit of value, and you may never reach this value when you're trying to sell the property you're listing. So understand that what I've found in our marketplace is that as people buy homes over the last few years and tear them down and build incredible properties in their place, 8, 10, 12,000, 14,000 square feet with incredible finishes, is that when they come back on the market years later, a new buyer in the high end, while they can afford the property, they don't want to buy someone else's mark. The person who bought that property left their mark with their design, with their amenities, and the next person coming along doesn't really buy into that. So they're not always going to pay the top dollar for that. They will not always pay full value for someone else's dream. So do your analysis, find your comparables, compare to your benchmarks, and one last word I'm going to leave with you is that you never average. You are a luxury real estate professional. You are a luxury real estate specialist. You don't do averages. You don't see the average price. You don't see the average square footage. You don't see the average anything. A machine can average. You can teach animals in the zoo to do averages. The word you want to use is reconcile. You reconcile the data available to you into a recommended price range based upon my experience and knowledge. You use your intuition or your experience, but you reconcile the data into a suggested price range for your property as of a certain date. So we have reconcile, we have range, and we have as of a certain date. Those are the important considerations when we're pricing luxury real estate. As always, I look forward to your questions. If you have any, send them to me at jack@jackcotton.com. And don't forget, if you bought my book, you have a 20-minute one-on-one phone consultation coming your way. So fill out the form, fax it to me. We'll schedule our time. Until we meet again next week, make it a great one.